Hey, welcome to our Life First Canada podcast. I am here to remind you that your greatness goes far beyond any document or title. You are more than a name, an ID number, or the roles that you play. You are a living, breathing expression of divine intelligence. And you came to this earth to awaken, to rise above limitation and outdated stories, and to remember your true inheritance, the freedom, the wisdom, and the creative power that has always been yours. So we're all being called now to be a part of the transformation of our world, of our life, our relationships. True transformation is having the willingness to look at everything, not just something that makes us feel comfortable. As you all know, you've been down different rabbit holes and it can make you feel really uncomfortable. It's so important. So at Life First Canada, we're here to take you on a deeper dive where no stone is left unturned and no part of our false history or the narrative is ignored. Because only when we see the full picture, right, the full picture of this reality, can we truly claim sovereignty. So life is asking all of us to have the courage to look at everything that you believed was true, to see that it might not be, and to allow that realization to really to liberate you rather than frighten you or say, no, that's not true. Because these are all belief systems that we have been indoctrinated to think is reality. And as you know, we bring on guests here to liberate you from amnesia that so many in this realm are suffering from. And as we know, the powers that were, they want humanity to stay dumbed down, to stay ignorant, to stay uneducated, so that they do not realize that they have been enslaved. So thankfully, many are waking up to realizing that we've been manipulated to believe in a false reality. And I get it. We've all consented on some level. And now we know that if we want change, if we want true change, it starts from within with shifting our mindset, opening our mind, opening our heart, doing our own research, and again, asking questions. Asking questions respectfully. So we're going to get right to this very important topic tonight. I trust everyone here has seen the film Canada the Illusion by film producer Timm Stein. He's shared his wisdom here a few times now, and we're really grateful to have him back. He just spoke at our Sovereign Living conference last month. He, as you know, exposes the fraud that has been committed against the people of the landmass, commonly referred to as Canada. And he is going to discuss the historic facts and showcase in detail who committed the fraud, etc. Timm he presents really hard facts that show how the illusion was implemented and how people have been deceived. If you're listening to the replay on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe and comment. We'd love to hear your voice and let us know what you think about our presenters, the topics we bring at Life First Canada. Welcome, Timm. We're so grateful, as I mentioned, to have you here. The room is yours.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for the nice introduction. I'm happy to be back and share the facts once again. Let me share my screen. All right, so we will talk about Canada the Illusion in a reworked way, meaning that over the past 8 months, some new facts came to light that are included in this presentation. For some of you, it might be dry, it might be boring, it might be historic facts that you think, why do they matter? Or I don't understand any of it. And I get it. I was like that in the beginning as well. But when I realized that it is tied to a lot of fraud and a lot of the shenanigans going on today, I found it quite interesting. However, I have to say that everyone is responsible for their own awakening. You have to do it yourself, and you can't blame others for not having awoken you. I don't want people to just blindly follow me and take my words for the presented facts. I will simply just guide you. And if you discover other facts, I'm always open to discuss them and look at them. I want people to really review all the source documents that are referenced. Don't just take my words for it. And keep in mind that some of those might need to be viewed in light of the timeline and the historical context of the writing and the politics of the day. So something that was done in 1929 might seem today as being irrelevant, but in 1929 it had a big impact, and that impact can still be felt today. As always, I'm fully transparent with my research. I do not charge any money. I'm open to debates, talks. Anyone has something to bring to the table, let's sit down and look at it. So, I will always, I will just present what is relevant and to this topic. There are a lot of facts that can be talked about, and then we'd be sitting here for about 17 hours. But some of the facts simply don't matter with regard to what we're looking at. So when we look at the landmass known as Canada, 1670, there was a royal charter for the Hudson's Bay Company, and that was issued for Rupert's Land. In 1759, at the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, Great Britain defeated France. And then in 1763, with the Treaty of Paris, New France was renamed to the province of Quebec. Also in 1763, this will become more important later on, the first letters patent were issued, appointing a Governor General for the province of Quebec. That Governor General was James Murray. Then in 1776, the 13 British colonies to the south finally had enough. They declared independence from Great Britain and they formed the United States of America. And in 1791, the Constitutional Act divided the province of Quebec into the provinces of Upper Canada and Lower Canada. In 1840, there was the Act of Union that merged the colonies of Upper Canada and Lower Canada into the province of Canada. And in 1864, some of the colonists also had enough, and they wanted to have a little bit of independence from Great Britain. So at the Quebec Conference, delegates from each colony discussed the desire to form a federal union. They still wanted to be under the umbrella of a constitutional monarchy, but they wanted to have federal government. They wanted to be in charge of some of the things their own. From 1861 to 1865, we had the American Civil War, and that was between the North, the Union, and the Confederacy in the South. And Great Britain greatly helped the Confederacy because they were trying to overturn the North. In 1866, we have John A. Macdonald, who was chairman of the delegates from the colonies, who participated in finalizing what was called the Kingdom of Canada Bill at the London Conference to draft the BNA Act. So he had promised the colonists from the Quebec Conference, yeah, let me take this to Great Britain and we'll get it all signed off. And they trusted him. Then in 1867, the British North America Act came along. It went into effect on July 1st, and it created the Dominion of Canada, a united colony. Let's take a look at that BNA Act for a little bit. This was the intended preamble, and it clearly stated, by reason of the request of the colonies for federal government, it is expedient, therefore, that they have laws and regulations to guide them. This is the modified preamble that was put on top of the BNA Act. Now, it states something similar, but the key is the word dominion. So it states the provinces of Canada, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick have expressed their desire to be federally united into one dominion under the crown. So at first it sounds like, oh yeah, okay, we'll get some federal government, we'll still be under the crown, but we're a dominion, great. Well, not so great. In 1865, the UK Parliament actually passed the Colonial Laws Validity Act. In it, they made it pretty clear that all Her Majesty's possessions are colonies. And then in 1889, they made it abundantly clear when they defined that a British possession includes any part of Her Majesty's dominions, and that the expression colony shall mean any part of Her Majesty's dominions. So the Dominion of Canada was a colony of Great Britain and not an independent country, and it did not confederate in 1867. The BNA Act was further not brought back to Canada for the United Colony to sign and ratify. And the BNA Act is located in the United Kingdom and has always been the property of the Parliament of the United Kingdom and not Canada. Now we need to talk about sovereignty and title to land and how they're connected. And going back in history a little bit, in 1625, Charles I ascended the throne as sovereign. He was not a great king. He borrowed money from the people. Actually, not borrowed. He confiscated money from the people. It was a forced loan and never returned it. Part of his doings led to the English Civil Wars between 1642 and 1659. When Charles I was executed, the monarchy was actually abolished, and Oliver Cromwell, who we see here, became Lord Protector. Then in 1660, Charles II was invited to come back and restore the monarchy. He ascended the throne, but with powers now very limited by Parliament and the City of London, meaning he was not a sovereign anymore. He had become a monarch. And since around 1660, the king or queen has not been a sovereign. So what does that mean? In the Encyclopedia of American and British Law, it is stated that the right to exercise the power of eminent domain is inherent in sovereignty. This right must belong to the state. It is also a part of the sovereign power of every nation. It exists independent of constitutional recognition and existed prior to constitutions. So this means sovereignty and the ownership of land are inseparable. If you don't own the land, you can't go and have executive government there. So since around 1660, the title to all British lands was actually held by the Crown in Chancery. But what's important to understand is that the Crown is not who we think it might be, like the British royalty family or the monarchy. The Crown actually refers to the private corporation of London that's situated in the City of London. It is not the king or queen. The Crown in Chancery that was established, I think, in the reign of Elizabeth I, is the legal and executive power of the Crown. The Crown Office in Chancery is formally known as the Lord Chancellor's Department, and its permanent secretary is known as the Clerk of the Crown in Chancery. The Lord Chancellor holds custody of the Great Seal of the realm, and this Great Seal is absolutely required on any official letters patent or royal proclamations because they're constitutional documents. The Lord Chancellor is also a member of the Privy Council and the Parliament. Now, Governors General, they receive their authority only from the Crown and Chancery by means of letters patent, not from the King or the Queen, or the House of Commons or the House of Lords, only the Crown and Chancery. The Privy Council was a secret council, still is today, that advises the King or Queen and whose members were senior figures from Parliament, judges, diplomats, and even military leaders. The Privy Council in 1625 established the Lords of Trade and Plantations, and that was established to manage the land of the colonies. This Lords of Trade and Plantations, what was later called the Board of Trade, received its authority from the Crown and Chancery. The ultimate jurisdiction was held by the Secretary of State and the Privy Council. The Secretary of State administered the affairs of the Crown and Chancery and the retention of the colony. He had not the executive power. The executive authority, the government within the colony, was exercised by the Governor General as a pure dictatorship. Again, Governors General received their authority only from the Crown and Chancery by means of letters patent, Nobody else issues letters patent to appoint the Governor General. What happens after the Governor General is appointed and the letters patent are attested by the clerk of the Crown and Chancery? Well, then the governor is presented to the king or queen to receive letters of instruction, and that's a pure formality. The letters of instruction refer back to the commission, which is also called the letters patent. Let's look at those letters patent from 1763, the very first issued to General James Murray. Those are documented in the archives of the Dominion of Canada as sessional paper number 18. They were issued by the Lords of Trade and Plantations, which are located in the Treasury Chambers at Whitehall. York and York are the attorneys for the Lords of Trade and Plantations. They were sealed with the Great Seal of the Realm by the Lord High Chancellor. This letters patent document actually constituted the executive government. It is a quite long document, and it really states the Governor General is the executive government. The instructions given to Governor James Murray by the King refer back to the commission, the letters patent, and it states that he is tasked with executive government. And they further state that he may even receive further appointments directly from the Privy Council. So it was a very powerful document. How is this connected then to the BNA Act from 1867? Section 6 of that BNA Act divided the previously formed province of Canada to resurrect the province of Quebec. Remember, in 1791, it had been divided, called Lower Canada and Upper Canada, only to be merged into the province of Canada in 1840. So at the time they wanted to do the BNA Act, there was no province of Quebec, but they had issued the executive government through letters patent to the province of Quebec. So they needed to resurrect the province of Quebec, and that's what they did. The parts of the province of Canada, which formerly constituted respectively the provinces of Upper Canada and Lower Canada, shall be deemed to be severed and shall form two separate provinces. It's the province of Ontario and the province of Quebec. So all of a sudden, Quebec came back into the picture. Section 12 of the BNA Act clearly states that all the powers, the authority, and the function which are at the Union vested in or exercisable by the Governor Generals of those provinces or the governors individually shall from now on be vested in and exercisable by the Governor General. So what this means that Canada could obviously not have two central governments. The Governor General was already constituted as the executive government in 1763. So they needed to resurrect the province of Quebec so they can simply continue what they already constituted in 1763 now to the entire unified colony with the BNA Act. The BNA Act did not constitute the Dominion government. It simply ensured that the Governor General continued to be the executive government, but now for the entire Dominion. Based on all this information, I created a flowchart because it was really difficult to wrap my head around all of this. And this flowchart basically applies between 1660 and 1931, and it only shows relevant parts of the Crown. There are other departments of the Crown that have no big impact on what we're talking about here, but I haven't shown those for just to keep the level of detail manageable. So at the top, we have the Crown. And again, the Crown is not the royal family. It's the private corporation of London, merchants and bankers. Underneath the Crown, we have the legal and executive government, and we have the monarch. Remember, the monarch doesn't have sovereignty. He doesn't have the executive government. We have the Crown Office and Chancery and the Privy Council underneath the executive government, and the Privy Council advises the monarch. The Privy Council, with the Crown Office and Chancery, they established the Lords of Trade and Plantations, or 1622. I call it 1625 earlier. They managed trade and foreign plantations, and they issued the first letters patent in 1763. That was sessional paper number 18. Now, under the Crown Office in Chancery, we have the Lord Chancellor. He has custody of the Great Seal. And we have the clerk. The clerk oversees the use of the Great Seal, drafts the letters patent. And he actually signs the letters patent on behalf of the Lord Chancellor. We have the Secretary of State, who administers affairs of the Crown and Chancery and the retention of the colonies. And the Secretary of State actually recommended the Governor General. You see how the monarch is not involved in any of this. The letters patent to the Governor General, once they are attested, then he receives instructions from the monarch, and that's the formality. So here's the connection between the first executive government that was issued in 1763 to basically keep doing it for the remainder and for the future of the United Colony. That's when they used the B&A Act, Section 6 and 12, so that they didn't have to come up with something new. They simply used this executive government constitution to continue. And anyone who wants to take a closer look at this, I'm sure there's contact information. You can email me. I can send you all of this. Or maybe Karen can share the entire PDF. We can deal with that after the presentation. Now, in the B&A Act from 1867, in Section 2, it states that the provisions of this act referring to Her Majesty the Queen extend to the heirs and successors of Her Majesty, kings and queens of the United Kingdom. Now, what we need to understand here is when it says Her Majesty the Queen, 99.9% of people think, oh yeah, that's the Queen, that's Queen Victoria, or the King, that's him personally. No. Since the 16th century, it has been customary in documents and court cases and statutes of Great Britain that when Her Majesty the Queen is mentioned, that refers to the office of the Crown Corporation. It is not the King or Queen in person. It is the private corporation of London, in the City of London. Section 9 of the B&A Act states that the executive government and authority is vested in the Queen. And again, that's very misleading because, first of all, the executive government was declared with the Governor General in 1763. And again, vested in the Queen. The Queen here is not referred to the person. It refers to the office of the Crown Corporation. That has been customary since the 16th century. Section 109 is quite important because it talks about the lands, mines, minerals, and royalties. And basically they declared, yes, they belong to each province, but we know that they were also colonies of Great Britain. So Great Britain was in charge of all the lands, mines, minerals, and royalties. John A. Macdonald, who in 1866 took the colonists' papers and said, I'm going to go to Great Britain and I'm going to get you your federal government and your half independence. Well, he actually helped Great Britain deceive the colonists into thinking they were now self-governed and had confederated. He was made a Knight Commander of the Most Honorable Order of the Bath, being granted the title Sir, on June 29th, just 2 days before the B&A Act came into effect. And that is a British title. Why would someone from Canada, who apparently brought back papers of confederation and made them more independent, get the title of Sir? That made no sense. He received generous titles, appointments in the British monarchy, a much younger second wife, and a nice fat salary for his betrayal of the colonists. He had also been a Freemason and became a member of the Order of the Masonic Knights Templar prior to getting involved with any of this. So my question is, how can he be called the father of Confederation when the Confederation actually never happened and when he in fact betrayed the colonists? We'll go back a little bit to the Hudson's Bay Charter because it's an important chapter. In 1670, Rupert's Land was defined as a British colony. Clearly stated in the letters patent, one of our plantations or colonies in America are called Rupert's Land. That charter, a charter is basically a letters patent. A charter reserved sovereign dominion to the grantors of the charter. saving always the faith and dominion of our heirs and successors forever. So the heirs and successors of the grantors, that's the crown. The use of Rupert's Land was granted through a latter's patent to the Governor and Company of Adventurers of England trading into Hudson's Bay. It's very important to look at the term territory because territory is not land or title to land itself. It means you get to do something on the land. It's management of land. This charter constituted and granted authority, courts, government, trade, and commerce, usage rights to all mines and minerals, and perpetual succession to the grantees. And the grantees, those were the Governor and Company of Adventurers of England. And it said forever. And when something is meant forever, it is literally meant forever. It cannot be taken back. Now, proof that they were not given the title to the land is also that they had to give an annual payment to the grantors. That was 2 elks and 2 black beavers. This shows that they basically paid rent. They paid a lease on the land. The charter further granted full executive authority and power, including army and defense, at all locations of factories and trade. This is a photo of the charter. That charter was sealed with the Great Seal of the Realm, which we can see here. And when you zoom in and you look up pictures of the Great Seal at that time, 1670, that's what it was sealed with. So it was an official document that was sealed with the Great Seal. At the bottom of the charter is stated by a writ of Privy Seal. And the Privy Seal is a personal seal of the monarch. And that's basically an intermediate step. It signifies consent of the monarch before the Great Seal of the Realm is applied. Remember, any royal charters, which is a latter's patent, granting incorporation, land, and exclusive trading rights, they were major constitutional documents and they required the Great Seal of the Realm. So that would confirm their legitimacy and permanence. The Great Seal has always been in the custody of the Lord Chancellor in the Court of Chancery of the Crown. No latter's patent are valid unless they are sealed with the Great Seal of the Realm. The sealing of these documents is performed by order of the Lord Chancellor and usually by the Clerk of the Crown and Chancery. So, is it then correct to say that King Charles II granted this charter? Or was it really the Crown and Chancery that granted this latter's patent? Was it the Crown, the private corporation of London? The Rupert's Land Act from 1868. Why was it put there? Why did it come into play? Well, after the American Civil War, when Abraham Lincoln had found out that Great Britain had helped the South to try and overthrow the North, the Crown was very afraid that the United States of America may annex Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory and actually British Columbia. They said, well, if Great Britain is that bad, let's just go north and take it all. And they couldn't have that. So they quickly thought, how can we suck it all in? Well, with the B&A Act in Section 146, they provided for the addition of other lands and colonies to the Dominion of Canada. So here we see we had the Dominion of Canada at that time down here, but we have the colonies that hadn't been integrated yet. So the United States were threatening to simply annex all of this. On July 31st, 1868, they passed the Rupert's Land Act, and it was passed to add the use of Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory to the Dominion of Canada with certain terms and conditions. So why only the use of Rupert's Land and not Rupert's Land in its entirety? Well, because they had the 1670 Charter, where they had granted the use of Rupert's Land to the company, the Hudson's Bay Company, and that was granted forever. So they couldn't just take it back. The Deed of Surrender in 1869. With that, the Rupert's Land included the whole of the lands and territories held or claimed to be held by the company. So From the 1670 charter, the held and claimed land was tied to the term territory. So only the land that was actually developed and used could be claimed by that Hudson's Bay Company, but not all the rest. So the land that had not been claimed or used by the company by 1869 automatically belonged to the crown because it was a colony. They defined it as a colony. The company was allowed to continue to carry on in Rupert's Land or elsewhere, trade and commerce. And that's why we still had the Hudson's Bay Company buildings. The company got to retain posts and stations and a limited future claim to blocks of land. What it stated in the document was that all rights of government and proprietary rights and all other privileges, liberties, franchises, powers, and authorities shall be absolutely extinguished. So the Dominion of Canada paid 300,000 pounds to the company. And today's money, that's around $83.5 million. The surrender was to the Queen's Most Gracious Majesty. Remember, that's not Victoria. That is the office of the Crown Corporation, the private corporation of London, the bankers and the wealthy merchants, the goldsmiths. But the people paid the price. They did not get the title to land or any of the mines and minerals that came with it. However, the Dominion of Canada had to show use of land so that it could make a claim to the land, because that's what was granted in the 1670 charter. It was granted forever. That's why they passed the Dominion Lands Act in 1872. That fully granted absolute ownership of about 160 acres to eligible individuals, but only as long as they showed improvement to the land and actually occupied it. So here you see a map, and the dark gray is all the crown grants that were issued. So a lot of Alberta, Saskatchewan, parts of Manitoba, and into British Columbia. Over 625,000 allodial crown grants were issued between 1872 and 1930. If you are one of the lucky ones that lives in one of those quadrants where you can get a crown grant, you can probably get your land patent before all the land is given to the bankers when the government of Canada defaults on its debt. Any land that was not granted through the Dominion Lands Act was held by the Crown because it was a colony. That brings us to the latter's patent from 1878. In 1878, the Crown instituted the Office of Governor General of the Dominion on a permanent basis. Why did they do that? Well, every time a Governor General changed, he had to go back to London, they had to do a whole bunch of paperwork, and then he would come back. So they instituted this so that he didn't have to do this, and they could simply appoint someone, and they could just take the cover page off the latter's patent and put a new cover page on and be done with it. It constituted that the executive government of the Dominion is exercised by the Governor General. Remember, that was already constituted in 1763, so it was nothing new. Section 9 says that the Crown, which is the private corporation of London and not the British royalty or the family, they declared full power and authority, including the heirs and successors. And just to recall what a latter's patent is, it is an official declaration that is used to grant patent rights by the Crown and Chancery to officially grant titles and office to people. Then came along the Statute Law Revision Act, and that's where a bit of confusion comes in with people. The purpose of this act, as it is stated in the act, was simply to repeal enactments that had become unnecessary. All enactments that were attached in the schedule were repealed, subject to the provisions of this act. The repeal of any enacting clause does not affect the validity of the corresponding act, and that is also customary. Once an act is enacted, it's law. You don't, just because you take the enacting clause out afterwards, doesn't mean the act is all of a sudden null and void. The enacting clause was only needed once. Afterwards, you can clean it up and take it out. In the schedule, what did they repeal? Well, they repealed the enacting clause of the BNA Act 1867, and they also took out Section 2 of the BNA Act. And they did it in the way that from be it therefore to same as follows, and Section 2. Now, Section 2 was a succession clause, and it stated that the provisions of this act referring to Her Majesty the Queen extend to the heirs and successors. Now, recall that the phrase Her Majesty the Queen refers to the office of the Crown Corporation, not the Queen personally. So, what impact did this have when they took it out? And in 1901, Queen Victoria died. Does it mean all of a sudden that the BNA Act died with her? No, because the BNA Act was to aid and advise the Governor General in the executive government. It basically had nothing to do with Queen Victoria personally. The Governor General had been constituted in 1763. The BNA Act just extended that constituted government to the whole Dominion. It was always the Governor General and the Crown who were in charge, never Queen Victoria personally. And because the Crown had instituted the Governor General, the office of Governor General, in 1878 as on a permanent basis with perpetuity, they declared full power and authority. So just because she died didn't mean that any of this stopped. The executive government was not affected. The succession of the office of the Crown Corporation sole that was established in common law around 1628 made Section 2 redundant. It basically means that the office of the Crown remained in existence without having to express it every single time. Now, for the same reasons, her death did not end the Dominion of Canada. It continued. And the Crown carried on. Russell Rogers Smith is someone who the government of Canada would like people to forget or never heard of. But he is the one who is partially responsible for the sovereignty and independence that we actually have in each province today. He was part of the Native Sons of Canada. And in 1926, prior to the Imperial Conference, Russell Rogers Smith sent a resolution to Prime Minister William Lyon Mackenzie King with a couple of requests that were necessary to be implemented in the Imperial Conference. The main request was the necessity of elevating Canada constitutionally to the status of a sovereign nation, to be equal, an equality of status with Great Britain. Furthermore, Great Britain should not make Canada pay for any claims that may arise out of Great Britain's defense actions. That was partially a result from 1871 in the Treaty of Washington, when Great Britain finally kind of said, yeah, we kind of messed up in the Civil War, so we're sorry. And there were some damages paid, but also Canada, the great John A. Macdonald, gave fishery rights and some parts of the land to the United States, just because Great Britain had messed up. It also stated that all natural resources should belong only to the people of Canada and not to Great Britain or any right honorable member of the Privy Council or the Crown. And the roles and authority of the Governor General should be fundamentally changed for the benefit of Canada. At the Imperial Conference in London, that was led by Lord Arthur J. Balfour, William Lyon Mackenzie King, and representatives of the other dominions. And those were Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and the Irish Free State. They discussed all the matters and concluded that the dominions are autonomous communities within the British Empire. They're equal in status and no way subordinate one to another in any aspect of their domestic or external affairs, though united by common allegiance to the Crown and freely associated as members of the British Commonwealth of Nations. Sounds all great, but when you read between the lines and you think, okay, united by a common allegiance to the crown. That doesn't really sound like they're independent. So the crown still wanted to hang on and have a say in all of this. But we'll take a look at the Statute of Westminster that made this all law when it was enacted in 1931. And that is the most important document that people could be aware of. Let's do a quick recap. Up to December 11, 1931, the government of Canada was the Governor General, period. He had a select committee of members of the Imperial Privy Council, but the government was the Governor General. Everyone was below the Governor General. Yes, the BNA Act provides great details about the Parliament of Canada and the houses and how they're all made up, but they all report to the Governor General. The lieutenant governors of each province report to the Governor General. The House of Commons, the Senate of Canada, the Privy Council for Canada, that was appointed by the Governor General, and the lieutenant governors were to aid and advise the Governor General and the government. The Governor General was the sole government. The lieutenant governor, who was appointed by the Governor General, was also a corporation sole, acting as the representative of the Governor General, but not as a representative of elected representatives or the people. And March 23rd, 1931, those are the very last letters patent that were ever officially issued. That was Lord Bessborough. He was appointed as Governor General of the Dominion of Canada. So the Dominion of Canada was defined as a united colony of Great Britain. Each province and territory by itself was also a colony of Great Britain. The allodial title to land was held by the Crown in Chancery, not the King or Queen personally. And the executive government and authority was exercised by the Governor General representing the Crown. And the Government of Canada, the executive government, had been constituted with letters patent in 1763. The BNA Act from 1867 strengthened that executive government from 1763 and now applied it to the whole colony, the entire Dominion. Then came the Statute of Westminster, and there are three key sections that apply to the Dominion of Canada that are extremely important. In Section 2, colonial law was removed from the Dominion of Canada. It states the Colonial Laws Validity Act that they passed in 1865 shall not apply to any law made after the commencement of this act by the Parliament of a Dominion. Recall the Dominion was defined as a colony of Great Britain. In subsection 2, it states that no law made by the Parliament of a Dominion is void just because it may be repugnant to the law of England. Further, that the Parliament of a Dominion has the power to repeal or amend any acts of Parliament of the United Kingdom that are part of the law of the Dominion. Section 11 is extremely important. Section 11 severed the connection between the Dominion and the colony of Great Britain. And the key word here is the term notwithstanding. Notwithstanding means it doesn't matter what the Interpretation Act from 1889 says. It overrules the Interpretation Act. That act, remember, it defined a British possession to be a dominion, and it defined colony to include a dominion. So now, Section 11 said, after the commencement of this act, the expression colony shall not include a dominion or any province or state forming part of a dominion. So all of a sudden, the provinces were not joined as one colony of Great Britain any longer. But also, each province was not a colony of Great Britain any longer, because it says any province or state forming part of a dominion. This means the Crown and Chancery immediately gave up the allodial title to land of the Dominion and each province, because they were no longer British possessions. This also means that all of a sudden the Governor General was immediately removed because the Crown and Chancery had no more title to land. You can only appoint a Governor General and appoint executive government if you have a title to land. Each province now naturally took ownership of the land and became sovereign for the first time. Section 7 is the one that confuses a lot of people, because subsection 1 says that nothing in this act shall be deemed to apply to the repeal, amendment, or alteration of the British North America Acts. So people say, well, we still have the B&A Act, so we're still under Great Britain. No, it's completely misleading. Why? Well, it attempts to exclude the B&A Act, but remember, the B&A Act was only a guide of the Imperial Parliament to aid the Governor General in the government. Only a Governor General can use the B&A Act. And to use it, you need to be legitimate. You need to be appointed. To be appointed, the Crown needs to have title to land. The Governor General was appointed only by the Crown and Chancery, and only as long as the Crown and Chancery had the title to the land. But Section 11 removed the title to land. So it becomes pointless for the Crown to appoint a Governor General because they can't. They can't do it anymore. They were no longer able to appoint a Governor General. So that means that this subsection is completely redundant. It can be ignored. Now, what could be said to this subsection is when this all of a sudden ended, December 11, 1931, you probably would have had anarchy because everything was all of a sudden gone. The whole parliament, everything would have been illegitimate. To give the people a bit of a transition period, this subsection basically states, well, you could use the B&A Act if you wanted to, but you don't have to. Subsection 2 simply clarifies that Section 2 of the statute also applies to any of the provinces. And that was the reference to colonial laws. Section 2 removed colonial law from the Dominion. So this basically ensured that colonial law is also removed from any of the provinces. Each province became a sovereign state or nation. The Confederation never happened in 1867. Why? Because only sovereign states can join into a confederation. Colonies cannot join into a confederation. But they had all been colonies until 1931. Now, for the very first time, they were actually sovereign states. Subsection 3 clarifies that the Parliament of Canada can only make laws that are within its competence. And it also clarifies that the legislature of each province can only make laws that are within its competence and cannot impose laws on any other province. It's similar to the United States of America, where the state of New Mexico cannot dictate the laws of the state of Arizona, or vice versa. So in summary, Section 2 removed the colonial law from the Dominion of Canada, which was a colony of Great Britain. Section 7, subsection 1 is redundant because the B&A Act could only be used by a Governor General. The executive government was constituted with letters patent for the Governor General in 1763. The monarch has had no executive power since 1660, and the B&A Act from 1867 simply extended the powers of the Governor General from 1763 to the entire Dominion. But Section 11 removed the Governor General. So nobody can use the B&A Act. The B&A Act is alive today, and it's still the property of the UK Parliament. But nobody can use it because they don't have the title to land anymore to appoint anyone. Section 7, subsection 2 removed the colonial law from each province. Section 11 removed the status of colony from the Dominion and from any of its provinces. The Dominion of Canada completely ceased to exist because the allodial title to land was given up by the Crown. Section 11 also removed the Governor General. There is a requirement stated in the preamble of the statute that the parliaments of all dominions and the United Kingdom must agree on any changes regarding succession or royal style and titles. Well, none of that applies because Section 11 removed the status of dominion. So when you're not a dominion anymore, it doesn't matter what the parliament of a dominion must do because this doesn't apply to Canada any longer. The rules of succession are also irrelevant for each province because, first of all, the king or queen has had no sovereign power since 1660, and without the title to land, the king or queen has no claim to executive authority, and neither does the crown. And there is simply no intermediate status between that of a colony and that of a sovereign state. You're either one or the other. Sovereignty and the ownership of land are inseparable. Confederation never happened because the provinces had never been sovereign states. They were colonies. Now, for the first time, December 11, 1931, each province was a sovereign state. Funny enough, this status has not changed since then. No province has held a constitutional assembly by the people, and no province has seated a lawful de jure government by the people. The Privy Council simply continued. The Great Depression hit, people had no idea what had happened, and here we are today thinking that we have a king, thinking that we have a legitimate parliament, but we don't. In 1936, the Parliament of Canada, actually illegitimate since 1931, they attempted to revise the Statute of Westminster, but without success. What did they want to do? They wanted to revise Section 7 to give Parliament the power to enact a federal constitution and to continue the BNA Act. But they couldn't. They can't revise the Statute of Westminster because that was an act of the British Parliament. So the Parliament of Canada had no right to modify a statute of another country that was issued by another country. They also attempted to amend the BNA Act, but they can't do that because A, they don't own the BNA Act, and B, the BNA can only be used by a duly appointed Governor General. The Crown and Chancery lost the title to the land, could no longer appoint a Governor General, and the BNA Act became a defunct document that could never be used by anyone ever again. When you go to the website of the Governor General of Canada, unless they have modified it recently, you'll find this statement. Until 1931, Canada's Governor General was chosen by the sovereign. This changed when the Canadian government began to make recommendations for the position. So, again, what is the only entity that can appoint a Governor General? That's the Crown and Chancery. Why has the Crown and Chancery not appointed a Governor General with official letters patent bearing the Great Seal of the Realm after December 11, 1931? Because they gave up title to the land. Now, when it says the Canadian government began to make recommendations for the position, making a recommendation is not the same as appointing someone. It's a wordplay. It's deceiving. We need to talk about the Great Seals. This is the Great Seal of the Realm during the reign of George VI. Only those who had custody of this Great Seal could issue letters patent and royal proclamations. Who had custody? It was the Lord Chancellor in the Crown and Chancery. The Great Seal Act from 1884 states that no person shall make or prepare any warrant for passing any instrument under the Great Seal otherwise than in manner provided by this Act or the Crown Office Act. And any person who acts in contravention of this section shall be guilty of a misdemeanor. No king or prime minister could issue letters patent or royal proclamations. It could only ever be the Lord Chancellor through the Crown Office and Chancery. This is the Great Seal of Canada, and it was created in 1867 for the Dominion of Canada. However, as confirmed by the Registrar General of Canada and the custodian of the Great Seal of Canada, this seal was always subordinate to the Great Seal of the Realm. So what does that mean? That means that the Great Seal of Canada by itself alone has absolutely no meaning. That brings us to the latter's patent from 1947. Because if you ask anyone today, where does the Parliament of Canada derive its lawful authority from? A lot of people state the latter's patent 1947. Well, Prime Minister, not really, after 1931, William Lyon Mackenzie King issued latter's patent, appointing a Governor General. They were signed by Mackenzie King and apparently King George VI. Now, a few questions come up because neither one actually had authority to sign these letters patent because neither William Lyon Mackenzie King nor King George had anything to do in the Crown and Chancery. King George VI would actually have violated the Great Seal Act. Why the heck would he do that? That leads me to the question if Mackenzie King perhaps forged the signature of King George up here. And was this an act of insurrection against the Crown and Chancery? Further, these letters patent do not display the Great Seal of the realm. Remember, any official letters patent must display the Great Seal of the realm. They display the Great Seal of Canada. It's a little difficult to see, but when you closely compare this image with this one, you see the resemblance. Only the Lord Chancellor of Great Britain can issue letters patent. Nobody else has the power or authority to do this. These letters patent have been absolutely illegitimate and unlawful since they were not issued by any competent authority. In 1976, Walter Cool wrote a letter to René Lévesque, Premier-elect of Quebec, and he tried to explain to him that Quebec did not need to seek a formal separation because the province had been completely independent and sovereign since December 11, 1931. Walter Cool understood the Statute of Westminster perfectly well. And he asked him, how can you be divorced if you have never been married? In 1982, Pierre Elliott Trudeau initiated the grand deception that is called the Constitution Act. And part of that Constitution Act is the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Now, all of this is an illusion, but many people strongly believe to be factual truth because they witnessed the Queen signing a paper, and Trudeau signed a paper, and the TV told him, now it's law, we have a constitution. Apparently, Trudeau patriated the defunct and meaningless BNA Act to Canada. But why did he only bring a photocopy? Why does the original BNA Act, to this day, reside in the parliamentary archives of Great Britain and not in Canada? So was the Constitution Act actually ever enacted? Section 58 of that act states that the entire act would only come into force by proclamation when Section 59 is satisfied. It says, subject to Section 59, this act shall come into force on a day to be fixed by proclamation. In other words, as long as Section 59 exists, the act cannot be enacted. Furthermore, it would be issued under the Great Seal of Canada. Does the Great Seal of Canada alone by itself have any relevance, any meaning? When we look at Section 59, it states that paragraph 23(1)(a) would come into force by proclamation in respect of Quebec. Subsection 2 of Section 59 states that such a proclamation would have to be first authorized by Quebec. And then subsection 3 states that when 1 and 2 are satisfied, Section 59 would be repealed, then the entire act would be renumbered to make it go away, but only by a proclamation again. The key phrase in all of this is in respect of Quebec. And why is that? Well, when we looked at Section 23, it talks about minority language educational rights. It states citizens of Canada whose first language learned and still understood is that of the English or French linguistic minority population have the right to have their children receive primary and secondary school instruction in that language in their province. Recall what it said in section 59, subsection 3, that this section may be repealed on the day that paragraph 23(1)(a), this, comes into force in respect of Quebec. And then this act will be amended and renumbered by proclamation. So what this means is if Quebec signed off on this, they would lose their educational right in the French language. There would only be English. You could see why Quebec would say, well, we're not signing that, dude. That's not happening. So Section 59 was never satisfied. What were the actual steps to enact the Constitution Act? Well, Quebec would need to authorize a proclamation to enact that Section 23. That section would then be enacted by a proclamation, the first one. Section 59 would be enacted by a proclamation, number 2, to repeal Section 59 and renumber the Act. Section 59 would then be 58 would then be satisfied, and the Act would be enacted by a proclamation. So we need a total of 3 proclamations to pass the Act. But none of these steps have actually been completed. None. This is from the Royal Proclamation from 1982, and it still states, subject to Section 59. It should come into force. The Act cannot be enacted as long as Section 59 exists. Subject to Section 59, it comes into force on the 17th day of April, 1982. So how can it come into force when it's still subject to a section that has never been satisfied? Nothing was actually enacted. There's no constitution, and there's no Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Furthermore, the BNA Act was never a constitution. It was a letters patent to aid and advise the Governor General. In 1987, at the Meech Lake Accord, and in 1992 at the Charlottetown Accord, they tried again to have Quebec sign all of this so they can finally enact it, but it still failed. They could never enact the Constitution Act 1982. Funny enough, with this royal proclamation, it also states, of all which our loving subjects and all other whom these presents may concern are hereby required to take notice and to govern themselves. So could I say, yeah, thank you for the present, but I don't want it. Thank you very much. So maybe I'll just go ahead and govern myself then. Did this leave a little loophole for the people to say, yeah, we're not going to go along with this, sorry? What does it really mean to govern yourself? And again, these letters patent were done under the Great Seal of Canada. There is no Great Seal of the realm. How come? The Great Seal of Canada alone has no meaning, no relevance. Now, obviously, not much has changed. Quebec has never said a word about this. They've tried a couple times to say, oh yeah, we want to separate, just to have a distraction. But what really happened? Well, over the years, on average, Quebec has received $12 billion in equalization payments. And that's a ton of money that you can use in your province. So maybe that's why they haven't said a word. I want to touch on the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, even though it was never enacted, it was never ratified. In Section 1, it states that the Charter is subject only to such reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified. This gives the government the option to completely ignore the Charter, and that is also why the courts often side with the government. Section 7 says everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. Well, it applies to persons. It doesn't state living men and women. What is a person? In Canadian statutes, the term person refers to legal fictions, such as trusts, associations, and corporations, in contrast to natural persons that may be individuals. But even that term is still not the same as a living man or woman. Section 32 is really a kicker because it says that this charter applies to the Parliament and Government of Canada and to the legislature and government of each province. So it applies to parliament and the government. It does not name anyone else. Does the charter apply to living men and women? It applies only to persons and the government. At the same time, remember, it was never enacted. What is a charter in a corporate sense? It's a written grant. It's a document that defines the rights and privileges, and it's a foundation document of a corporation. A person is defined as a legal fiction and not a living man or woman. And a charter is not a constitution because a charter is granted by a foreign government, but a constitution is established and written by the people, not by a government. The court system in Canada is a subcorporation of the corporation that operates under the name Government of Canada, and that will be shown in detail in the upcoming documentary film about the Canadian flag. But judges in Canadian courts absolutely love it when people enter their ship and claim their constitutional rights or their charter rights. Why? Because the judge doesn't even need to establish jurisdiction anymore because the people did it for him. They automatically submit themselves to the admiralty jurisdiction that does not grant them any such rights that they're trying to claim. What is Canada then? In the Interpretations Act from 1985, it is basically only defined as water. The land is not mentioned anywhere. It refers back to the Oceans Act. Let's go look in the Oceans Act. It only calls out water. Waters on the landward side of baselines of the territorial sea, low water line along the coast, nautical miles. There's no land mentioned anywhere. It even says that Her Majesty in right of Canada is basically the internal waters, the seabed and subsoil below the internal waters and the territorial sea. There's still no land. Why is the land not mentioned? Because they don't have title to the land. Since 1931, they have not had title to the land. That title belongs to the people. I want to point to the Clarity Act because it's really important to understand when people in Alberta try to push for a referendum that you are being set up for failure. And here's why. The Clarity Act was based on a Supreme Court opinion and not a ruling, simply an opinion by some judges that work for the government. The government is entitled to formulate the wording of a referendum, not the people at all. The people have absolutely no impact. Furthermore, democracy does not mean a simple majority anymore. Now they need a clear majority. Well, what is a clear majority? Furthermore, the clear majority doesn't get you to secede. It gets you to start negotiating. With who? The guy who wrote this. And only after a qualitative evaluation determined whether that clear majority has even been achieved. So who gets to determine this? The secession is tied to the loss of Canadian citizenship. That's the government slavery system, but people still depend on it for travel, for example. It basically states, unless 100% of all people of a province vote to secede and lose Canadian citizenship at the same time, there will never be negotiations about secession. So what do you think the chances of success are? That you get 100% of people, that's the clear majority, and then all of them say, yes, screw the Canadian citizenship. Those are very slim chances. So the representatives in the House of Commons get to determine what is a clear question and a clear majority prior to any negotiations, not the people, the government again, who wrote this thing. So the government that you want to secede from gets to decide how you run your referendum, if the vote is clear enough, and if they allow you to negotiate with them. And then they can still say no. Can this really be successful? Remember the little child case in Alberta from 1990. Constituents voted for a member of parliament who claimed that he was not going to support the GST. As soon as he got voted in, he voted for the GST. So they sued him. The court decided that he had no accountability to its constituents. He didn't owe them anything. That set precedent going forward. It states that it's recognized that there's no right under the Constitution of Canada to effect the secession of a province. Well, we don't have a constitution. The BNA Act never was a constitution. It was a guide to aid the Governor General in the government. And 1982, that was never enacted. So the non-existent constitution would first have to be amended before any province can secede. That makes no sense. And again, this amendment requires negotiations with the governments of all provinces and the government of Canada. So do you think Quebec would like to negotiate here to make these equalization payments go away all of a sudden? I don't think so. The government of Canada gets to decide the terms of secession in its negotiations before any minister can even propose the secession. So how many years do you think all these negotiations will take? How successful will a referendum really be? Or is this just a big fat trap set up by the UCP and other political players to dangle a carrot in front of people's faces saying, you could be free and independent, just follow us down this road and vote? This will not be successful. And it's absolutely not lawful. So what would be the solution? First of all, educate yourself and your children. Research the facts that I have presented here, learn the truth, read the documents, see the connections, break the patterns and the indoctrination. And that is celebrating Canada Day and waving the Canadian flag. Because the flag does absolutely not present or represent what you think it does. Educate your friends and neighbors by using the Socratic method, because a lot of people are still brainwashed. If you bombard them with facts, they'll run the other way. They can't handle it. The ego can't handle it. You need to plant a seed, ask a simple question to get them to start thinking about it, and they'll come back to you when they have more questions. Sometimes this is difficult, but offer help, kindness, and patience to those that just realize something is wrong. Don't tell them they're stupid, because then you can't win them over. This is really important. Be suspicious of any corporate attorneys. I don't say lawyers because they don't have the law of the land. They are part of a private corporation, their bar association. And they work for the government. Part of their oath says that they need to put the interest of the state above the interest of the people. Also be suspicious of so-called constitutional experts, because they use presumed authority to keep you trapped in the illusion. And again, that's the reference to the referendum with the Clarity Act. We basically have to reach a critical mass of people who understand these facts and are willing to put their foot down and say enough is enough. Because we don't need to fight for independence like the colonies in the South did in 1776. We already have the facts, the truth, the independence, and the law on our side. We just need to exercise it. We just need to declare it. When we have enough people, we'll hold a constitutional assembly to elect delegates and agree on a provincial constitution. After that, we seat a de jure lawful government. And that must be without any involvement of corporations, attorneys, lawyers, anyone. They can participate in their capacity as living men or women, but not in their capacity of state actors. After each province has been properly established with a constitution and a de jure government, then they can talk about a federation of the provinces if they want to. But no politician, minister, judge, governor general, or anyone else of the corporate regime of the current illegitimate de facto system needs to be asked for permission. Absolutely not at all. The people have been the sovereign since December 11, 1931. It all starts with a simple, peaceful declaration of independence and sovereignty by the people. Each constitution will include transitional clauses to transition from the current de facto system to the proper lawful system. Committees of the people will be structured to help with the transitions. And that means not everything we have in the system right now is bad, but it's run by bad people. It's run in a bad way. So it needs to be transitioned. Some things need to go away. Some things just need to be made better. And that's where the transition period will help. Natural resources can be used as backing for new money, not currency, money, either gold and silver coins, or maybe a cryptocurrency that could be made. But there's absolutely no income tax. There's no point in having income tax because you can use tariffs as external revenue, or you use your natural resources as revenue. Foreign investors must create a corporation within the province and hold all province in a bank that is in the same province for the same length that their corporate charter was granted. Foreign investors will never hold the allodial title to the land or any title to any natural resources. They can only buy the right to use the natural resources, but they will never own the land or the mine. That always stays with the people. The people benefit from foreign investment through royalties, dividends, and partnerships. Current pensions, they can be transitioned to a de jure system and held in specie. That's another term for real hard money, gold and silver coin. And that would be backed by the natural resources of the province. Any votes, assemblies, and decisions must be documented, recorded, and protected with blockchain technology. So you can have voter fraud. You can't have people say, oh, we never talked about it. No, because everything is documented. And there can be absolutely no division among people. Indigenous people and all others, we have all the same enemy. So if we're fighting among each other, the guy at the top is just laughing his butt off. Lastly, the Constitution must actually state accountability and punishments for the government entities that try to violate it. That's something that's missing from the US Constitution, that they stated government should not act against the people, and if it does, the people have the people must take it down. But it never stated penalties for the government, and I think there should be harsh penalties stated in a constitution that you're the government, and if you do any of these things, here's the punishment. And with that, I just finish off with my final quote that I really like because it describes what we've been doing so well, that you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. You're running in circles if you try to fight the system, if you try to fight in the courts that are owned by the same corporation. If you really want to change something, you need to build a new model that eventually just makes the existing thing completely obsolete. Let it die by itself, let it starve, and don't try to actively fight it. And with that, we're at the end of my presentation.
Tim, thank you. You are a brilliant man. And I know that
Thank you.
you've blown many people's minds, especially those who have never heard you speak before. This is incredible. I just put in the comments here. Where did it go here? I love what you said. Be suspicious of corporate attorneys and so-called constitutional experts that use presumed authority to keep you trapped in the illusion. Yes, thank you for that. And another solution too is there can be no division among the people. And that's what they are really pushing for right now. Okay, I know we have a lot of questions here. We have about 10 minutes or so. So Esther, I'm gonna just pass it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Tim. Lots of positive comments in the chat. Make sure you save it so that you can look at them later. And we will definitely not be able to get to all the questions, but we'll do our best. First one is from Denise. Is our so-called prime minister aware of this, all of this? And how about the provinces?
I would say definitely they must be aware, especially the so-called prime ministers. They are all part of the Privy Council. As soon as you're prime minister, you get the title of Right Honorable. You're part of the Privy Council. They know exactly what's going on. And especially the current one, he ran the Bank of England. That's in the city of London, the wealthy merchants and bankers. He knows exactly what's going on. Um, Other of the provinces, I'm sure Danielle Smith knows very well what's going on, but maybe she has people above her who tell her, do not speak about this or else. Um, I'm sure the people who are in power and playing the game, they are aware of it. And you may have noticed recently in Alberta, there's a lot of attempts to discredit the Statute of Westminster. I have not gotten verbal personal attacks yet, but the statute has been attacked. They've tried to discredit it and tell people, "Oh, don't pay attention to it. It's useless. It's wrong. It does nothing." And I think with that, they're just doing the opposite. People start looking at it more, which is great.
Thank you, Tim. I know that Karen has posted the link to your previous movie, Canada the Illusion, in the chat. So definitely have a look at that. A question is, when is your next movie documentary going to be available? Approximately.
Problem. I'm hoping before the end of the year. A lot of work has gone into this one, to make it more appealing to the eye. And so there's less reading on the screen, but a lot more visual aspects in there that tie it beautifully together. It's tied into who is the corporation government of Canada. It ties into some of the facts that I have presented today and connects them. And it really lifts the veil on this whole illusion and deceit.
Thank you, Tim. Christina asks, are we already the 51st state or a subsidiary of the corporation United States of America?
That's a good question. Since we are 10 separate sovereign provinces, states, nations, we couldn't be combined, be the 51st state. One could be the 51st one, the next one is the 52nd one. However, um, there were certain things that happened early in 2022, and there was a key date, January 17, 2022, that was mentioned in several channels at the time, that it was a historic moment. And I have a gut feel, I have nothing to back it up. It's just my gut feel that at that time, um, this landmass up here was united with the United States into the Republic of North America.
Yeah.
And it was stated at that time that when it will be made public, it's historic. Um, to me, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I have nothing to back it up. It's a gut feel. But also looking at how Mark Carney has deliberately destroyed everything here for the past 8 months. Like he has been on a constant path of destruction. It to me makes somewhat sense that he was installed to really drive it down, destroy it all, burn it to the ground, wake the people up, to get to the point where the people are saying, whatever, let's just do this. That's my gut feel.
Thank you. Deborah asks, she says a lot of things. I'll let you read that later, but she would love your perspective or your views on exactly what King Charles did when he was visiting here in Canada. It was during the time when the Hudson Bay stores were shutting down. She was under the impression he was selling our rights with the Hudson Bay Charter. Was there a connection? Are we no longer part of the crown? We may not be a country, but then what are we becoming then, in your words?
Um, if you are in the Hudson's Bay store, you would technically be on land that belongs to the Hudson's Bay Company that received the charter from the Crown. That was never taken back to the Crown. That belonged with the Hudson's Bay Company. So selling the charter, to me, it might have some meanings in terms of ending the rule of the British. I don't think we are still under the Crown. I don't think the charter has anything to do with. I know I've heard it before, where some people think the charter is being used by this corporate entity to play this government game. Um, I don't think it's possible. I don't think there's a connection there because it was all tied to use of land and not owning the whole land. That's my take on that.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to skip around here now. Don asks, who has the power to grant allodial title after 1931?
Well, I would say that is the sovereign, and the sovereign are the people. So when you look at crown grants, the original crown grants, where I am, it was issued in 1901. And these crown grants are held in the land titles office of each province in a secure safe. You will never see the original. You can pay about $150 to get a certified copy, which you can then use to make a declaration to have your land patent. But these crown grants, they're held in secure safes because they're worth trillions of dollars. And that is exactly what the bankers in the City of London will come and collect when the government of Canada or any provincial government will default on its debt. They've printed so much fiat currency that it's going to collapse at some point. And then when you tell the banker, sorry, we can't pay back the loans anymore, they want something in return. And what are they going to give them? They're going to give them the crown grants, the allodial title that actually belongs to the people right now.
Thank you. And are mineral rights related to allodial title?
Yes, because they're
Okay.
stated in the crown grants. So the allodial title lists the royalties and the minerals. Um, and when you transfer an allodial title onto you to get a land patent, technically on my property, I could drill.
Okay, my internet is a little unstable. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Uh, Susan asks, how can the current Governor General declare she has any authority? And how can we, the people, take her to task?
Well, she cannot declare it. And funny enough, if you use the Wayback Machine, because nothing on the internet ever gets deleted, you get to the Governor General website from 2001. And on there, it is stated that the Governor General is the de facto government. And de facto means it's technically not their lawful, but since people go along with it, we're just going to go do it. They took that off, I think, in 2002, 2003, but it was stated. So what can you do? You can put them on notice. They're not going to care because they're either dumb in a position where they don't know what you're even telling them, or they're so far high up in the corporate world that they think they're untouchable. So trying to take them to court is not going to do anything because the court is a subsidiary of the government of Canada. And the Governor General is a subsidiary of the government of Canada. So you can really just ignore. I would do it this way. Focus on these facts. Focus on understanding the Statute of Westminster. Get other people to understand it so that we can all have an assembly, make a declaration, and write a constitution. Because the more we do this, the more we wake up and pay less attention to this corporate beast, it will simply starve. It will die on its own. We don't need to actively fight it. So the Governor General, I would simply ignore. If you want to put a notice together, it says notice of fraud and liability, send it to the Governor General. You will never hear back. But you can claim, if you send it with registered mail, once they start working again, then you have a record that it was delivered and signed for, and that the Governor General was put on notice. But besides that, I would say let's put our energy and focus on better things.
Thank you. I'm going to paraphrase some two things from Moz. So if what you're sharing, it may be interpreted that we have no constitution, we have no government, we have no laws, what a mess we are in. And if we don't have a constitution, no government and no law, the only thing that is intact and enforceable is consent, which makes the contract, and contract is the law between the parties. Is he missing something here?
No, that's correct. The current system, even though it's de facto and illegitimate, it completely works on consent. You consent to, like, as soon as you apply for a driver's license, you consent to relinquish all your rights and only abide by what they give you, the rights they grant to you. Same with the passport, same with the social insurance number, everything is consent. Um, Taxation used to be consent until they took certain things out of the Income Tax Act to make it a little more difficult. Property taxes technically is theft and operates by consent. Now, they made it extremely hard to just say, I'm not going to pay anymore because they will actually evict you, even though they don't have the law to stand on. But everything works on consent. Does it help to remove yourself from the system completely and remove all your consent? No, because we don't have enough people awake yet, and even on the law enforcement side, to understand what that means. Yes, you can drive without a driver's license as long as it's not for commercial reasons, and you can even drive without a license plate unless you're in a commercial activity. But you'll get pulled over, taken to a police station, and then you'll have to explain to them for 3 hours why you can do that. So it just makes your life very difficult and unmanageable. So we really just need to remove this consent piece by piece and putting out notices, waking people up. The more you can get people to send similar notices to the same district, to the same municipality, the more that municipality will notice, oh, wait a minute, something's wrong. If it's just you and you're trying to fight it, you'll get really tired of it. But yes, the answer is everything works on consent right now.
Tim, there are so many great questions, but I'll leave you with this final one. Will there be a PDF available for this reworked version? And if so, where might it be posted or how can people get this? Because what you've presented is so valuable.
Yeah, I have, it can be found on my Telegram channel. I can email it to people if they email me.
Can you
I
put
can,
your Telegram channel in the chat, please?
And
yep, I'll
it,
make it very simple. I'll put the
I'll be
email
posting it in our
address.
newsletter as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. I missed that on here. Well,
That is the website of the film. And on that website, you have links to Telegram and Twitter or X. And if you want to email me directly, I'll put that in the chat as well.
excellent. Thank you so much. We're complete with this part. Karen, I pass it back to you.
Thank you, Esther. Great job. Great questions, everyone. Yes, Tim, I'm so grateful that you are doing this work. And we've been saying this from the very beginning with Life First Canada that we all need to unplug from the illusion of government and really claim who we truly are. And so you have done the research and are just so brilliant at sharing what you do. And I'm so glad that you've taken this journey on. I know that there's a lot of people out there, not here, but out there that disagree with you. And I'm so glad that you are just holding your position. I love it. And yeah, we're just grateful to have you here. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're running a little late, but thank you all for your great questions. Everyone is so grateful for you here, Tim. I think you've seen them in the chat. There's one here. Yeah, there's a lot to digest, Danny. If you go to our Life Force Canada YouTube channel, there is the actual Canada the Illusion documentary that Tim created last year, I guess it was now.
Yeah, it was December 11, and I like to celebrate December 11 every year as Independence Day. because that's when each province became independent and sovereign.
I love that. You please send me an email or text a few days prior to December 11th, and I'll make sure that we get that in the newsletter.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Together we rise. Thanks, Esther, again, and Karen Hannah. Thanks, Karen, for putting the links in the chat. Appreciate it.